This is the IDP After Show.
Welcome to the IDP After Show. I am your host, Jeff Pomazal, and in this episode, my good friend Kyle Bellefeuil and I are looking at some maybe under-the-radar IDP free agents who might be signing with a new team in the very near future. Kyle, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, man. How you doing, Jeff? Thanks for having me back, by the way.
Oh, this is fantastic. Since the last one, I was very much looking forward to the next time, so this is perfect.
Yeah, me too, man. I was hoping I didn't outwear my welcome last time, but man, I appreciate you having me back.
Oh, no. I just, we were talking a little bit before the show, and every time we've done an episode, you've had a baby in your circle somewhere. So you got another one on the horizon here soon. So
Yep. None of them are mine, but in the circle, like you said. So no, it's been pretty fun. A lot of cool things happening around here.
Well, that's fantastic. Best of luck to everyone there. So
yeah, thanks.
All right. So tonight, Kyle, we're going to look at some IDP players whose value is probably going to see a significant change here in the very near future. Dynasty football is a lot like playing the stock market. You want to acquire low and maximize a player's value at the peak. And there's no more volatile time for a player's value than during the NFL draft, which is coming up in a few weeks, and during free agency, which we are literally right at the doorstep of that happening. So in this episode, Kyle and I are going to share some of our favorite defensive linemen, linebackers, and defensive back free agents who you might want to make some trades for, or check to see if they're possibly even on the waiver wire. And these players are going to definitely be players who are going to make some splash this season, possibly for your fantasy football team. This year's defensive lineman class is loaded with free agent IDP studs. Brian Burns and Josh Allen just recently have been tagged, but they possibly still could be signed and traded here, so that could possibly be an outcome. Yannick Ngakoue, Chase Young, and Chris Wilkinson. Chris Jones just signed a deal with the Chiefs, and we have Marcus Davenport. So there is no shortage of high-profile names. Kyle, I'm excited to hear who you have first on your list of defensive linemen for this season.
Right on, man. So number one for me, and I kind of went with a contender pick and then a younger flyer pick here. So first, the contender pick was Danielle Hunter. Hunter had a fantastic 2023 season. He had 83 tackles, 54 solos, 23 tackles for loss, which was tied for the league with Mad Max Crosby, 16 and a half sacks, 22 quarterback hits, and 4 forced fumbles. Just a fantastic year for Hunter. Pressure-wise, he had 80 pressures, good for a 13% pressure rate. Those 80 pressures were his second largest season total over his career. He had 97 back in 2019. That was his top number. Injuries had hampered Hunter during the 2021 season, but he hasn't missed a game over the past 2 years, and he's logged 27 sacks over that 2-year span as well. So he's shown to be durable and productive over these last couple seasons, which is exactly what you'd like to see. Hunter is currently 29. He'll be 30 during the 2024 season. However, he's shown no signs of slowing down, and as I stated, his health hasn't been an issue because he's played all 17 games each of the last 2 years. He's a solid target if you're a contending team looking to add another difference-making defensive lineman or edge, however your league scores it. And if you can play the used car salesman card to get a slight discount, on him, and you can pitch the fact he's about to turn 30, good for you if you can work that in, right? Ideal landing spot, I have the Los Angeles Rams. Him and Byron Young would be a nice duo, edge rushing duo, and then stack that with Aaron Donald. Hopefully he keeps playing, and the young, impressive Kobe Turner, who showed up last year. I think that would be a pretty cool front. And then another spot I thought would be really, really cool is Detroit. But as me and you talk, Jeff, as Packer fans, we don't want to see him in the NFC North anymore because he's so damn good and he gives us problems. But that's my spiel on Danielle Hunter. I think he's a good contending piece if you're looking to shore up that DL or edge spot.
And then, so Kyle, we were kind of talking about these as players we want to go out and acquire. What are you willing to offer or give right now for a player like Hunter?
Yeah, I would have no problem paying a second-round pick for Hunter if you can. Obviously, what kind of team he's on. If it's a middling team, is it a contending team? Is it a team that looking to rebuild, it will help your cause to get him for that second round pick. You might have to pay a little more, but you know, you and Jason covered it really well. And last episode, it was last week or earlier this week, the mock draft, like you guys covered all the positions, but you also talked about how there's a tier, right, with these edge rushers too. You know, Latu and Verse and Dallas Turner are all really nice prospects. But after that, it's a little murkier on how these guys are going to fall and where. And if you're a contender and you need a guy, and you're probably going to have a late pick, something you talked about, Jeff, when we were talking before the show, you're going to have a later pick. I'd rather just try to get Hunter and short up and go for it if you're a contending team. And I think he's got plenty of left in the tank, and he showed that. So,
yeah, definitely. When thinking about like this year's draft is very offensive loaded. We have a handful of quarterbacks. We've got a ton of wide receivers. You know, but the defensive side of the ball, the defensive side of the draft seems to be really kind of suppressed this season as far as stud players. There's like the definite teardrop, especially at the defensive side. Defensive line, there's probably 3 guys you're going to want to go out and get. Linebackers, right now there's a handful, maybe 2. And, you know, as we've always said and preached on the show, it's defensive backs are just wait. You know, you never draft them and stuff like that. So, you know, you're looking at that third round pick, that early second round or late second round pick, for a guy like Hunter's services, that could definitely be the missing piece for some teams to put him over the top. So
totally agree. And I'd throw in a little bit extra sauce on it if you have to get him, if you're close, right? With if that second, you know, I still think he showed us, like I said, he showed us he's been durable, and he was awesome last year. And I think he's got enough left for a couple more years to help your contending team if you need another guy.
Well, another player that's probably going to be on the move, and if you've listened to either the IDP show, you've probably heard this name thrown out a little bit, is Bryce Huff, formerly of the New York Jets. He's got that prototypical build for an outside guy. He's 6'3", 255. He had a great 2023 season. He played 481 snaps. Of those snaps, 334 were pass rushing snaps. He had 45 hurries, which is good for a 13% hurry rate, which is top 10 in the league. He had 12 quarterback hits to go along with 10 sacks. Super efficient with his pass rushing. Very, very efficient, almost to the point where there's going to be a regression if he gets more snaps, which is something you're probably okay with because he only plays pass rushing snaps, and his tackle total actually suffers because of that. He only had a combined 15 total tackles in 2023, so he almost had more sacks than he did combined tackles, and he's only had 38 in his 4 years in New York. So hopefully if he plays a few more snaps, maybe his efficiency comes down a little bit, but he'll rack up a few more tackles and kind of make up for that efficiency with the sacks. For me, an ideal landing spot for Huff would be Atlanta, Washington, Chicago. I think he'd be a great complementary piece to a team's already existing number one. I don't quite think he's ready to be a number one on his own, but I think he'd be a great complementary piece. And he's a guy that I would easily give up a mid to late third for a team that's maybe a defensive lineman away from making a run. So,
yeah, I love this call. Bryce Huff, we just want to see him go somewhere and get a little more run. And I love the point you brought up about, it might lead to a little bit less efficiency-wise because his pressure rate is nuts, man. The guy he's a problem. But, it might lead to a little bit less efficiency, but you also, with a little more value, might get more of a stable floor with him each week and not just, boom bust. So you hope he can keep up the splash play production because that's what he's really good at. But, with the added volume, obviously the efficiency can drop, but we'll take a little more stability. So when you plug him in, you're not getting the goose eggs, right? But, Huff is man, I'm excited. He's one of the names I'm excited about to see where he goes, man. We want to see him get some run somewhere in the New Jersey because he just hasn't got a shot yet there with the Jets. So,
which is really surprising too because they have a very good, with Robert Saleh there as the defensive or the coach, very defensive minded head coach. You would think that they would have a better rotation and use him a little more. I know that they are pretty talented at the defensive line spot, but man, somebody who's as productive as Huff, you'd like to see him get on the field a little more often than he was. So,
absolutely.
All right. So, who do you have as your second defensive lineman to acquire before free agency?
Yeah. So my second one here, I went with more of a contending guy. The first one, this one's more of a younger flyer type. It's AJ Epenesa. He's a former second-round pick in the 2020 draft, and he will be just 26 during the 2024 season. He's been a rotational guy, depth guy during his time at Buffalo, but I know they all are rotational guys at Buffalo, right? He played 387 snaps, 41% snap share over his 15 games in 2023. Logged 6.5 sacks in 2022 and 2023 in a part-time role. We saw flashes this past year, especially in his lone start against Jacksonville in Week 5. Where he generated 6 pressures on the day, and he got home for 2 sacks on 59 defensive snaps. So that was a nice day for Epenesa. 2023 was also Epenesa's best year grade-wise. He had a 75.8 defensive grade and a 75.0 pass rush grade between the regular and postseason per Pro Football Focus. Epenesa is a big, longer-framed guy. He kind of seemed to figure things out a bit this past season, it seemed. The issue with Buffalo was the pass rush room. It's just been really crowded with Greg Rousseau, Leonard Floyd, like Von Miller these past few years. They like to deploy him certain ways and rotate him in. He's a deeper dynasty league name. Leagues where you start 3 to 4 guys. He likely won't cost you much to acquire. He could be a throw-in on deals. We had talked about this before the show. A lot of these guys. What we're hoping for with Epenesa is a change of scenery where he gets a shot at a larger role to see if it can lead to some profit off a cheap acquisition, right? That's kind of where he lands. Not a big name. You're hoping for get him cheap and he's startable, usable, or maybe you trade him with something, add him with something, and you get a little profit on it. Ideal landing spot. I picked Washington. They're pretty barren. They traded their edge guys. We all know Chase Young went to San Francisco. Sweat went to Chicago. They still got the big guys in the middle. Their edge group, KJ Henry, Casey Toohill, James Smith-Williams. Henry's a guy, he'll be a second-year guy to Clemson who I kind of like, but he's flashed a little bit. But if Epenesa were to go to a place like Washington, and if he can't carve out a role, that's a problem. So I kind of picked a spot where he should be able to carve out some volume and opportunity. If he can't, well then but so he's just kind of that flyer that if he, like you even said to me, some of these guys might be sitting on your waiver wire and you might have an open spot. Click, price of a mouse click. Shout out Johnny the Greek, right? We're always looking for those guys, or a throw-in, or a late pick. So that's kind of where I see Epenesa. Just like to see him go somewhere else and see what he can do too.
And I love the idea of literally the price of a mouse click getting some of these guys, because some of these guys' value is going to change so much in the next week. Good, bad, or indifferent. Epenesa goes to someplace, all of a sudden he gets a little buzz about a new signing. Another manager in your league goes and checks on him and like, oh, he's got him. I'll give you a 5th for him. Like, I'll take that. Like, it doesn't cost you anything, and you just, you acquired low and you're selling at peak. You're just getting a little more for your team. So,
absolutely. You got to find those guys that you think could get a little bit of buzz in camp, right? And then, or at some point, off-season workouts, or when they sign and everybody's buzzing, and you're like, oh man, I kind of like that. And yeah, sure, I'll take the pick. All I did was click the mouse. Right. So it's profit.
And you're probably going to end up having to cut guys like this anyway once the season gets close, because your draft is happening. You're right before you have to cut down at some point. Like, I'll take a free 5th round pick or whatever it might be. So
for sure.
That's just smart football. All right, moving on to my last defensive lineman to acquire before the start of the free agent frenzy is going to be none other than Josh Uche of the former New England Patriots. Again, ideal build, 6'3", 240. You just knew this guy was going to be pretty dynamic player when he came out of Michigan. Last season, he had 331 snaps, 227 of them were on the pass rush. He had 28 hurries, good for an 8.7% pass rush rate. So a little bit less than Bryce Huff, but I think the whole league was a little bit less than Bryce Huff was. So, he had 6 QB hits, 3 sacks. He was a guy that I really was high on last year as a 3rd-year breakout. He was trending in the right direction, getting more snaps every season. But just like every other New England Patriots player, you really can't quite trust them to be in your lineup each week. And then he did suffer a foot injury in week 6 and never really kind of recovered from it. He was just kind of always like kind of hobbled and kind of on a pitch count for that. So I think his 3rd-year breakout might be coming this year in his new home, just that he's finally going to get a chance. He'll be fully healthy. He'll be out of the Belichick shadow of finally getting to play a full complement of snaps. And I think an ideal landing spot for him would be someplace like Miami. He would have that revenge game narrative, things like that. Like you mentioned, Detroit would be a great place for him, not having to be the number one guy, but he could go back home. He could play in Detroit or even Minnesota. I think if Hunter leaves, I think they're going to have to fill a void. So we might see a lot of shuffling of these players where they're, one person signs and then another guy just kind of fills in that role from this. But there's definitely going to be a changing of the guard on many of these teams. A lot like Epenesa, I think like he could be had for like a 5th-round pick or even like a throw-in on a bigger deal. A manager might be frustrated that he didn't have a great season last year and is like just ready to move on. So he might be a good get at this point. So.
Yeah, man, I like this call a lot, man. I like both your calls. Like we were talking before the show, Huff and Uche. Guys, Huff obviously, like the insane pressure rate, and we're all excited. And Uche too, like we know the talent's there, right? Another guy that's flashed super impressive talent at times, and he's just been stuck in New England, and they just do weird stuff, and he never really got his fair. We feel like he hasn't got his fair shake right yet in New England, and the injury, like you mentioned, too, slowed him down, and a change of scenery for him. And I really like you said, where he doesn't have to be the guy too. He's a dude that's got juice, and he's an athlete off the edge, so he can just put his ears back and go. I like Uche, and I think you can get him super cheap, like you said, and he's got a shot to make some noise.
Well, even thinking about too, where he wasn't even in New England, he wasn't having to be the guy because he was playing across from
Judon.
Yeah, Matt Judon. Like he never had to be the guy. He didn't have to be the focal point of the offensive blocking scheme. So he got freed up and had a pretty good run. So
yep.
A lot of teams are in need of players like that right now. So
absolutely, guys that get pressure are in high demand.
Yep, it's all about stopping those guys or drafting those guys. So
exactly.
All right, so we're gonna switch gears here a little bit. We're gonna switch to the cream of the crop with the linebackers. This is the crown jewel of IDP, and the linebacking position is not to be outdone with big names and lots of talent here. Perennial All-Pros and All-World players like Bobby Wagner, Devin White, Shaq Leonard. Just a few of the guys on the linebacking free agency market right now. So, Kyle, who do you have at linebacker, and who should we be interested in ahead of free agency?
Yeah, so with the linebackers, I kind of did what I did with the linemen. I picked a contender buy, and kind of a younger flyer. So, the contender asset I chose was none other than Lavonte David. He just ages like a fine wine, right? Unbelievable. Or scotch, fine, whatever. Whatever you choose. Lavonte David, he showed no signs of slowing down last season. He racked up 134 tackles, 86 solos, 17 tackles for loss, and 4.5 sacks over 15 games. The grades were also still good and green across the board, posting a 71.7 defensive grade, 74.7 tackle grade, and a 67.6 coverage grade, showing he can hold up on all 3 downs, right? He can still do it. He's been doing it for years, and he can still do it, man. This one's pretty simple. If you're a contender looking for another linebacker to help shape out your room, while you can go for it, David shouldn't be overly expensive and showed he still has plenty of gas left in the tank. Plus, you can hard sell the fact he's going to be 34, and this might be his last ride while you bargain. If you want to put on the used car salesman hat. Wow, we'll get there.
Hope he gets a lot of sacks.
I hope so. Yeah, let's add to that too. Absolutely. You can try to bargain there with the age. Ideal landing spot. We were talking about this earlier, right? Can you go anywhere else but Tampa Bay? Run it back. It's been good there, and they brought Evans back. All signs kind of pointed to Baker probably was going to be coming back. This should be a pretty competitive team in that division. They should bring back their defensive general and let him rack up tackles. And I think he's got if that happens, I think he's got another big year in store, solid year. Like I said, he showed no signs of slowing down. So I'd be looking to go get him for another year.
Yeah, I like this call a lot. Just Devin White for sure is not going to be back with the team. And how historically good has Tampa Bay been with linebackers? Just Derek Brooks.
Yep.
They've just been so blessed with great linebackers over the last few years and seasons. And like you said, I can't see him going anywhere but playing in Tampa. He's a fan favorite. He's definitely a face of the franchise. He's been there for forever. So
yep.
Yeah. Good call there. All right. My first linebacker I'm going to share tonight is Azeez Al-Shaair formerly of the Tennessee Titans. He's got that great size. He's 6'2", 228. He had a great 2023 after fully becoming a full-time player after 4 seasons in San Francisco. He played just over 1,100 snaps last season, and he graded up very, very well in the run defense. He played 434 snaps in run defense. He played 608 in coverage. Wasn't asked to do a whole lot in pressure or rushing the quarterback. He only had one sack and 4 quarterback hits, but he did make up for it with the tackle department. He had 108 tackles and 49 assists. And so he finished the season as in Big 3 scoring as linebacker 14. And this time last year, he could have been had for anything, and he probably was on a lot of waiver wires at this point last year. So he came in day one. Mike Vrabel loved the way that he took control of the defense. He was talking players up and just like that extra coach on the field. So definitely a team that any defensive coordinator would love having on their team. For me, ideal landing spot would obviously be back in Tennessee, or maybe even going out to the Pacific West to play in Seattle. With Bobby Wagner and Jordan Brooks both being gone, Seattle's looking for kind of a remake on that defensive linebacking position, so I think that would be a great spot for him. I see him as being a player that needs to have no one around him to be a volume play, to rack up those tackles and things like that. I think he could easily kind of disappear if he was like the number 2 on a team. But this year we saw in Tennessee when he was really the only linebacker, outside of like a Jack Gibbons or something like that, he really made the most of it. So I would be willing to part with a 3rd round pick at this point. Kyle, you had mentioned it earlier about this draft kind of being a little suppressed and depressed with the defensive side of the ball. And by the time you're drafting in the 3rd round, you're kind of looking at, am I going to take that rookie linebacker, or am I going to take a guy that I know that can play? And for me, it would be a no-brainer. This is a layup. So,
yeah, I like that call, man. And like you said, running it back in Tennessee would be really good for him. He showed he can hold it down there. Like you said, not a ton of competition. You view him as a guy that he kind of needs that. That would be perfect, right? Because there's not much there. Monty Rice didn't happen. Jack Gibbons, he's a part-time guy. He's one of Gibbons is one of those guys who's like a useful IDP in those deep leagues, where you roll 4 of them or whatever. But that would be good for Al-Shaair. And I think Seattle's interesting. The running it back in Tennessee, you kind of can see what it's going to be, and then Seattle would be a little intrigued to see what he does with Mike McDonald there. So that's I like Al-Shaair as well, and I like that. I would pay a 3rd round pick if you need a guy, and you're unsure of how it's going to fall to you in the draft. If you had your heart set on the top few guys, whether it's Peyton Wilson or Edgerrin Cooper, or even if Junior Colson has like a big pro day, which I think he could, and he vaults up a little bit, and you're not sure that those guys are going to slip to you, and you want to make sure you get a guy. Like you said, if you want to pay that 3rd round pick for him, I could see that for sure.
I was wondering how long it was going to take for you to slide in a Michigan player, so I was just kind of waiting for that. So
not very long.
About halfway through the list, and there it is. So check that off your bingo cards if you're playing at home. So
absolutely.
All right, Kyle. Who do you have as your linebacker 2 to look to acquire?
So it's more of a younger flyer type, and I went with Willie Gay. Willie Gay, he's still just 26, former 2nd round pick in the 2020 draft. Coming out of that draft cycle, we got really hyped about Willie Gay because he had that beautiful 9.7 RAS score, which we love to see, those athletic numbers. He ran a 4.46 40-yard dash, so everybody was hyped for him. And his tape had some fun moments to watch as well, along with the athleticism. Gay's seen sporadic usage during his 4 years at Kansas City. He did rack up 88 tackles, 51 solos, and 9 tackles for loss on 608 defensive snaps in 2022. However, his production dipped a bit this past season, just 58 tackles, 44 solos, and 4 tackles for loss and 624 snaps. So a little bit of a drop off there after that, 3rd year build up. We were hoping for more, but that room got busy, and we know what happens in Kansas City if your name's not Nick Bolton, right? Outside of Nick Bolton, when healthy, the Chiefs, deploy their LBs in such a way that there isn't another full-time LB traditionally outside of Bolton. So it was crowded, with the signing of Drew Tranquil, who stepped in for Bolton when he got hurt to the lead role, and then Leo Chanel. He was a third-round pick in 2022, who is a super interesting, athletic dude, big physical linebacker. So it's a pretty crowded room. Gay's shown promise when given ample opportunity, and while his coverage grade was just 41.1 in 2023, not very good. It was 74.1 in 2022 on a similar workload. So it's kind of weird, right? Same amount of snaps, but the grade was just completely different. So kind of a tough one to take away there. So he's shown both ends, right? He can do it and he can't. But a new team and opportunity could serve Gay and IDP gamers well, as he's shown the 3-down traits and he's shown the athleticism. We just want to see him get the opportunity to see if he could consistently go one way or the other, right? Traditionally, if you're on the field, if you're a full-time linebacker and you're on the field, if you do get a chance, you're going to put up points, whether you're just getting away, tripping guys on accident. You're going to get a tackle or two, right? So ideal landing spot, I picked Denver. They have Alex Kingleton as the tackle machine lead guy there. Josie Jewell's going to be a free agent. Did I say Jewell? Is it Jewell? Oh my God. Did I spice that one up?
You had a couple more high noons than I thought you did, huh?
Oh yeah. So Josie Jewell's going to hit the free agent market, and it sounds like Drew Sanders is going to shift to edge. So, but what we're hearing right now, so there could be a potential opening there in Denver for another linebacker, and I don't think Gay is going to cost a ton on the market, and he'd be well fit to take a prove it deal where he could get some opportunity for volume, because he's still just 26. He put some good tape out there with a full season somewhere else, and he could get himself a nice payday. So I think Gay's the guy that we've kind of been intrigued by since he's come into the league. Like we said, the athleticism, the capital was nice in the second round, and it flashes, and then Kansas City's tough, right? For linebacker, Spags doesn't like us for IDP very much. So, we want to see him go somewhere and see if it can be fruitful, I guess. So I'm willing to take a shot with the later pick, right? Late 4th, 5th round pick, throwing, type deal. I'd take a shot on Willie Gay.
Yeah, and especially with as the draft gets closer, the rookie fever really starts to hit, and so. Yeah. Yes. A lot of managers are like, oh, I want that new shiny toy. So, you'd be surprised, what you can get, once it gets close to draft season, or even at the draft, just to throw out some trade offers and, see what hits. So,
yeah, it's a great point, right? Rookie fever hits. You never know. You might get a guy for way less than you think, around less, whatever, So,
you had mentioned it too about the 1-year prove it deal. So you take a player like Gay, who's he bets on himself. He goes out and balls out. He'll be 26, 27 at the end of the season. And then he still has time to sign that one more big contract before, like earlier you mentioned Danielle Hunter. He's like 29. He'll be 30 during the season. This is kind of it for him.
Yep.
He's on the back 9 of his career. He's not going to be able to have that one more, unless he's like a super Adrian Peterson type freak athlete who's going to play beyond those years. This is his last run at a big payday, where a player like Willie Gay, he's like, I can still play. I got, just really hitting my stride in the NFL, getting it figured out. Hey, I'm going to take a 1-year prove it deal. I'm going to go out and ball out, and then I'm going to get that big payday. So definitely a good call there. Well, someone who else is just finishing up their rookie deal is Kenneth Murray for the Los Angeles Chargers. He's going to be my second linebacker tonight. 6'2", 241. When he came into the league out of Oklahoma, he was just like, he was going to be the guy. He was like first round draft capital. Everyone thought that he was just going to be like the second coming here. So finally put it together in 2023. He played just under 1,000 snaps, kind of asked to do a little bit of everything. He had 9 hurries, 2 quarterback hits, and 3 sacks to go along with 84 solos and 23 assists. He was banged up a few weeks, and so he's kind of back on and off the watch list there towards the end of the season, but he did finish as the linebacker 27 last year in Big 3 scoring with 178 points. Again, he was a player that this time last year probably could get for next to nothing, just because the previous few seasons had not gone the way that managers probably had hoped. So looking ahead to this year, being that the Chargers just released Eric Kendricks this last week. We got a new regime coming in, new coaches. Harbaugh's there. He might want a little veteran leadership to go alongside Derwin James on that defense. Someone who's been there to kind of like help the culture of that locker room, and then maybe someone to bring Deion Henley kind of along and help him progress as a starter in the future. So ideally for me, I would love to see him back in Kansas or in LA in the Chargers. If not there, maybe Miami would be also another ideal landing spot for him. He's a player I think that a manager is going to be a little harder to give up on now that he finally had a good season, but maybe he could be had for a 4th-round pick or a throw-in on a bigger deal. So Kenneth Murray has finally come to play, and hopefully he's lands in an ideal spot to have another good season. So
yeah, the 4th-year breakout, right? Like this,
right.
we all knew. Yeah, it's wild. Like we finally saw something from Kenneth Murray, and yeah, it's a good point. Like it finally happened. He was productive for us, and he was kind of turned into the player we kind of were hoping for a few years ago. He still might not cost a ton, right? And you can always pitch back the fact that we only saw it once, man. The first 3 years, it wasn't much, but yeah, I do think running it back in LA with the young Henley wouldn't be a bad play for him either. Obviously he's going to see what the market says. They just let Kendricks go, so yeah, no, it's super interesting to see like what's the trajectory from here for him, right? It took so long for him to break out, and he finally did. Is it gonna steady off? Is he gonna keep? Did he just figure it out? Is it gonna get better? Are you buying super low right now? Does he turn it? Or does he? I like the Kenneth Murray call. He's intriguing as a 4th-year breakout that we typically don't see.
3rd-year breakouts for wide receivers, 4th-year breakouts for linebackers.
Yeah,
right?
That's the new norm.
Right. Welcome to 2024.
Yes.
Thinking about these players, and we're talking about acquiring players like this and, buying low, what it is. But with any defensive player, Kyle, are you in the mindset like there is really no one that is untradeable for you, especially on the IDP side? Like, if someone comes along and offers you above market value, like there's really no reason to hang on to any defensive player, right? Because just the turnover rate is so great from year to year. Like we mentioned with Kenneth Murray, like, hey, he finally had a great season. Like, is that a flash in the pan? Is that a player like as an owner or a manager of Kenneth Murray right now, I should be like, I'm going to try to sell this guy? Or is he a guy that like, what are your thoughts on holding on too long?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Like Kenneth Murray for sure. Like, right, he finally hit, and if it's like, hey, I can move him. He's that player I'd move, especially linebackers too. Like you said, is there players that are just like there's no negotiation talk. You're not moving them. I agree with you. Like if the offer is if they're willing to pay, I'll move them. I'd be more of a stickler with the edge guys. Like Nick Bosa, Max Crosby. Micah Parsons, Myles Garrett, those guys, I'd be more apt to be hesitant to trade them. But if somebody wants to pay up for them, I'm always willing to listen. But yeah, for sure. If all that means is if I trade them, that means I get to go searching to make a trade, which is even more fun, right? So you got to try to scheme up the next move, right? And that's what makes this so much fun, right? We play this game to have fun. So making moves to make more moves is the most fun. And that's this time of year, as far as like we're trying to buy low on these guys before free agency or during or after. And then we're trying to, get rookie picks and shuffle around and get our guys. This is it's a fun time of year. But yeah, not to ramble on here, but yeah, I'm with you. Everybody's for sale. I'd be a stickler for a few guys, but if you're willing to pay, I'm willing to move them.
I think that's sound advice too, just because the turnover rate is so dramatic from year to year. Players that we think they're players that can't bust. And then all of a sudden every year we see this list, and it's just like, how did he miss? There isn't a way.
Right.
Well, speaking of turnovers, and turnovers as far as like at a position, next up is the defensive back position, and this year is mega loaded with talented players. Kevin Byard just got released. Justin Simmons just got released from Denver. Cameron Curl, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Budda Baker, Eddie Jackson, just to name a few of these defensive backs who are available. Kyle, let's kick it off one more time with you in your final position here of the defensive backs. Who you got as your DB to acquire?
Okay, yeah, this is a fun sell here. Jeremy Chinn. Um, so just started off. Jeremy Chinn completely fell out of favor in Carolina in 2023. Right, played a career low 286 snaps, 39% snap share. Predominantly played in the box and slot areas over 12 games in 2023. He had previously had a 90% plus snap share in each of his first 3 seasons. So that's quite the drop off, right? I know I'm really selling this as a buy.
You're gonna have to. You're gonna have to.
Right. So first off, I'm not advocating for this big Chinn resurgence right now because it wasn't pretty this last year. But his value can't get much lower after this drop off, after the steep drop off of 2023. It's just right. I mean, you can't have much worse of a season. You just completely fell out of favor. It wasn't complete injuries. He was banged up a little bit, whatever, but it was tough. And but Chinn is still just 26. He's young, and we've seen him be productive. He had 200 plus tackle seasons to start his career, so we were all excited. We've seen him be productive. I'm just, I would like to see a new team and a fresh start. I think it'd be good for Chinn. And you look at this rookie safety draft class, it's not overly strong. It's pretty meh. There's a few guys, right? There's a few guys we like. Shout out Adam was talking to Cole Bishop, he's a fun player. Him and Vaki and Utah were a fun tandem. Newman from Minnesota. There's some guys, right? There's some guys we like, but overall, not a super strong class by the looks of things. So if not, I don't really like to draft a lot of defensive backs anyway. If I'm a fade DB guy all the way through, but unless the value's right, there's always a breaking point. But I would take a shot on Chinn with a later pick with the shallow safety class and see if he can find a decent spot and fall into a nice role and get back to being he's just got to get on the field more than 39% of the snaps. And, is when we just need some volume for him again. So if he can find a starting role and kind of get back to the way things were, I think, he'd be a nice bet for a late pick considering the safety class isn't overly strong. Ideal landing spot. I picked the Colts. I was trying to find a fit for him. He's a tough one to fit in. He's kind of a tweener type and all this past season, but I thought, if the Colts move on from Julian Blackmon and let him, if he gets paid for agency and they got an opening in that Gus Bradley box role we know is productive for IDP, Chinn should probably be, he's not going to cost a ton for him. And, he could be it'd be fun to see him in that role, I think, to see if he could do it. It's kind of was my thoughts. It's a productive role and he's a box type guy. So I was trying to find a spot for him. And I thought, why not the Colts? Cam Chancellor 2.3.0, 4.0, whatever. 4.0, 5.0, whatever.
It's so funny that, Chinn's fall from grace. Like there were 2 seasons ago, he was legit locked in as a top 3 dynasty safety, along with Budda Baker and him, where they were like 1 and 2. There was no, and he had that dual designation where he was playing a lot of linebacker and stuff like that. And he was just like, and then how quickly, that fall came, anybody who listens to the show or, listens or reads your articles knows that like, this is the position never to invest heavily into. And you alluded to it in your draft strategy too. Just wait, fade the DBs. There's a reason, that's on bumper stickers everywhere across the country that's a real thing. So
yeah, that needs to be a bumper sticker.
You haven't seen my car.
Love it.
So, all right. Well, I have a defensive back I'm hoping comes much closer to Green Bay this season.
Yes.
Xavier McKinney, the former New York Jets. He's 6 foot 201. He had a fantastic 2003 season. Played 1,128 snaps. He was really asked to do everything on that defense, and I think that's what makes him so intriguing, not only as a Green Bay Packer fan, but just for the fit for them because of what the safeties are asked to do in that defense. They're asked to play in the box. They're asked to play the slot, the corner. They're playing deep. And McKinney excels at just that, all of those areas. He graded out extremely well in his PFF scores in all those metrics. So just a player that can do it all. He had 4 hurries. He had 94 tackles and 21 assists. He had 3 interceptions. So just a player that can play all over the field and is just a really nice chess piece for a new defensive coordinator in Green Bay. He played 637 of his snaps, came in the box, 57%. So as a IDP manager, we love that because that's near the box or near the ball. It's going to get a lot of play, rack up some tackles. He finished last season as DB9 in Big 3 scoring with 206. I doubt that he's back with the Giants. Last week he had this really cryptic tweet about finally seeing life from a bird's eye view. And, Twitter's a horrible place anyway, but just kind of be in a place where maybe he's not going to be back with the Giants. Maybe he just sees that that's not a possibility, and now he's awake to go other places. Ideally, I would love to see him in Green Bay, selfishly as a Packer fan, but also from a IDP manager perspective. Philly would be a fun place for him to go. There's that narrative about that division rival. Philly's definitely a place that needs secondary help with Byard being released and my all-time favorite rookie of all times last year coming out of Illinois. Sidney Brown got banged up at the end of the season with his ACL, so they're looking for some help. Also, LA could be a fun place to go. If they get Danielle Hunter, that secondary is going to be getting a lot of pressure there. So I like McKinney a lot. I think he's, like you said, this draft safety class is pretty weak. And so I'd be willing to give up a third for McKinney's services for my teams. And with him only being 26, he's got a lot of run left. And for someone who doesn't want to invest heavily in a secondary player or safeties, that's probably fair market value for him at the time.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, man. I'm a big Xavier McKinney fan. I think he's a well-rounded player. He's a productive IDP safety. And I hope his next cryptic tweet is a piece of cheese on Twitter because, yeah, I want him in Green Bay as well, Jeff. We need a big splash at safety, and he's the guy for me for sure. I'd be smitten if that was the move, especially like IDP wise, like you said, trading a third round pick for McKinney if you need a safety. I like that move. I'm talking about when I was talking about Chinn, I'm talking throwing late, like a fifth round pick. Somebody they're probably ready to give up on him. And in contracts leagues, I saw him cut one of my contracts leagues because he was getting way too much money. And so that could be there as well, depending on what your league format is like. But so for him, I was more advocating taking the dart throw because rather than drafting, in a weaker safety class, take a shot on a guy who's proven it, who could fall into a role possibly. McKinney's a guy I like, talent-wise, IDP-wise, and I hope he is playing for my favorite team as well. I want him on my fantasy team and my favorite team.
There you go. 2 reasons to root for him on Sundays.
Yes. Let's talk this into
and Thursdays. And
Thursdays,
Mondays.
Fridays, and whatever. Yeah, absolutely, man. Let's talk this into existence.
All right, sir. Who do you have as your second safety?
So my second safety is Julian Blackmon. Blackmon, he's coming off his best year, especially from an IDP lens. He had his previous career high was 50 tackles, I believe. This year he had 88 tackles, 65 solos, 5 tackles for loss, and 4 interceptions over 15 games. Blackmon was more of a deep safety to start his career. But he shifted to the box role in Gus Bradley's defense last year, which we've seen be very productive for IDP goodness. He saw 643 of his 987 snaps up in the box and slot area in 2023. We want him up we want our safeties up near the line, up near the mess, up near the fun stuff to make plays, right? Blackmon, he'll be just 26 when the season gets here. And after this last season, he's proven to be a versatile safety, who can do a lot of things. He's shown that he can come up in the box in the slot area and play there. He can hold his own deep. I don't think he's gonna cost you a ton. He had a sneaky solid 2023 season. I don't think name value wise he's gonna cost you as much as like Xavier McKinney, right? I like taking a shot at him if you really need a safety and you want to spend a late 4th or a 5th or whatever. I like Blackmon as taking a shot at him. Ideal landing spot. I'm such a homer as far as this pick goes. I picked Green Bay as well. I know you picked Green Bay for McKinney. I picked Green Bay for Blackmon because as I was looking at the safety group, I want McKinney for Green Bay NFL wise, and I was looking at some of the other guys, some younger guys that the new Jeff Hafley led defense might might be interested. And I was like, man, Blackmon would be kind of a neat acquisition as well. I don't know what he's going to cost on the market, but he can do a lot of things, right? He can wear a lot of hats for that defense. And, and I think it'd be a good fit NFL wise. And I think it'd be nice IDP wise as well after what we saw out of him last year. So.
And one thing too with Blackmon too, he might be even a cheaper just because he's coming off an injury. He missed the last couple of games of the season. Like that owner is like, oh, all of a sudden I know like on Sleeper this last week, all of the IR players had to be added back to your rosters and stuff like that. So there's a lot of dropping and stuff like that. That'd be an ideal time to like, I'm kind of conflicted between 2 or 3 guys to drop. Hey, I'll give you a 25 or a 2024 5th round pick for him. Like, fine, I'll take it, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a great point.
All right. Well, our last player tonight is kind of like you said, we have that premier player and then that kind of under the radar player who's maybe not going to be, maybe possibly on waiver wires more than likely, but this is going to be PJ Locke of the Denver Broncos. Kind of finally came out of really nowhere after week 13 for the Broncos. He's got that build. He's that short, stocky 5'10", 202. He had a great 2023 after finally getting an opportunity to play after some injuries and suspensions in Denver. He didn't become a full-time player until week 13, but he played very, very well to close out the season. A lot of green marks for him in PFF. He played 538 snaps. Again, asked to do a lot, probably more coverage than I would necessarily like as my number one defensive back, my safety, but it makes a great flex play or a safety too. He did have 3 sacks, 19 solos, and 19 assists to go along with a pick 6 for a touchdown. So that was kind of a little icing on the cake. Again, this is all after week 13. So he finished with 112 points in those 6 starts for the season. Ideally, I would love to see him back in Denver. I think with the release of Russell Wilson, with the trade today of Jerry Jeudy, I think that team is looking to kind of hit the reset button. They're going to need some cheap options to play. PJ Locke knows the system. He knows the plays. I mean, he'd be a very cheap to sign back. And so ideally, I would love to see him there again. If not Denver, I mentioned maybe like you mentioned like the Colts might be a place to go, or even like maybe the Jets. I know that they've been kind of have a rotating door right now at the defensive back safety position. Just might be a chance to get a player, a fresh start, like you said. And that's a lot of these players might need just that fresh start. I would only be looking to acquire PJ Locke off of waivers or as maybe like a throw in on another deal. Just there's no reason to give away a draft pick for a player like Locke. He should not be anything massive to acquire for your teams, but kind of a nice little piece, a little intriguing piece if he does kind of sign back with Denver. They release Simmons. He's the veteran in the room, really, if that happens. So something to be said for that. So
yeah, I like this call too. Like you said, especially he might be a price of a mouse click guy, right? If he's sitting out there, he shouldn't cost you much. And he was a waiver wire gem down the stretch last year when he filled in. You made a great point. He knows the system. You think, maybe he takes a 1-year prove-it deal, or to come back and he was productive in Denver, or maybe he gets maybe they pay him a decent 2 or 3 year deal because they like him and want to lock up a spot, at a fair price, being they just let Simmons walk. But I like this call, especially after we saw last year. He was a nice little waiver wire gem for us, and I like running it back in Denver, or like you said, those other spots that are going to give him an opportunity to play a full season, getting a nice snap volume in the starting spot. So I like that, especially if you can get him as a throw-in or mouse click guy, man, or your 7th or 8th round pick if you have a super deep draft.
We love those leagues. Those
are the best. Love it, man.
Well, Kyle, this has been fantastic. I always love chatting football up with you. Great work as always. It's fun to kind of talk shop here a little bit before the season gets started, and really the season does start this week. With free agency starting, we're going to see so much turnover in players' value. Some guys are going to spike, some guys are going to crash. It's fun on both sides of the ball. We have a lot of big offensive names that are going to change teams and really change the landscape for fantasy football, but that's also going to be the case for IDP. There's going to be a lot of players that are going to be in new homes and either salvage their value or they're going to destroy someone else's. So this is a really fun upsetting time of year for many fantasy managers. So, what are you kind of working on right now, and where can the good folks find some more of your stuff?
Yeah, well, first off, man, I want to say thanks, Jeff, for bringing me on again. This was a blast. First time was awesome. This was awesome, dude. Love chopping up with you and talking ball, and it's before the show talking about all kinds of stuff. And
right.
Good times, man. I appreciate you bringing me on. This was a lot of fun. You can find my work over at footballguys.com. Me and my buddy Joey the Tooth wrote up some pre-combine player profiles, doing our top 10 at each position, kind of get some of the rookie stuff out there. Working on the dynasty ranks, kind of working those rookies in there, getting a feel for where they're going to fit in. Working on those, and we're going to do a IDP only pre-draft IDP only rookie mock draft here soon. We did one last year with 6 of us, me, Joey, Tripp, Aaron, Sigmund Bloom, and Matt. Then we're gonna give her a shot again here, maybe next week or the week after, and do that, and we'll do one post draft. So that, looking forward to that. It's fun. It's just fun seeing where, it's early, right? And just seeing where other people view these guys and put them in there, and then we write little blurbs on why we took who we took, and it's fun. And you and Jason crushed it last week with your episode, and the boys over at the IDP show, and all the stuff you guys are going on, man. There's tons of really cool rookie content out there. So.
And I find that exercise so valuable, because you have a guy who was projected to do well during the season. Okay, check the box. He did well during the season.
Yep.
He does well at the combine. He checks all the boxes pre-draft, check 2. And then all of a sudden he gets the draft, goes to an ideal landing spot, high draft capital. That's the check. That's the third check. And then that's probably a player that you're probably feeling pretty safe drafting, just because he didn't come out of nowhere. Like, he wasn't a player not on your radar, which players definitely can do, but you kind of go through those gates. You have that player that was like, oh, this season is going to be his senior season, he's going to do great. He did. He nailed he draft stuff with the combine. Yes. And then you just feel so much more safe taking a guy like that, and like, oh, this guy came out of nowhere and just blew up the combine. I never heard of him. And is that a player that is an underwear warrior, or is he really a player that can play on Sunday with the pads on? So,
no, it's a great point, man. I'm totally with you. You got to check boxes along the way. If a guy does all of a sudden come out of nowhere, maybe on your radar at the combine, gives you a reason to go back and check the tape and the grades and the metrics and see, like, if that all coincides, right? What you're seeing athletically shows up on tape, right? This dude's fast, but can you see it and process it? If you're 4.4 fast, but you don't know what you're seeing, you're not going to make too many plays. If you're 4.65, 4.7 fast, but you see it right, you're in the right spot, you're going to make more plays, right? So it's kind of one of those things, right? You got to take all the pieces, put them together, put your board together, check the boxes. I love that. Check the boxes along the way, and then the landing spots happen and really shake things up.
Right.
So,
yeah, another frustrating night sometimes too is watching the draft unfold and seeing these players, like, pre-draft, everyone's going to an ideal spot, everything's great, and then reality hits, and Seattle's taking 4 running backs in the first 3 rounds, and it just crushes everyone's dreams. So
the Chiefs just drafted Peyton Wilson, and
right. The whole world melts, and Twitter just burns to the ground. So
it burns right down. Yeah,
which maybe isn't a bad thing if that happened, but
not all bad.
Right. So, all right, Kyle, that's awesome, sir. I appreciate it. That'll do it for this week's episode of the IDP After Show. Join me next time as Mr. Green Dot himself, Mike Woolert, and I take a look at some of the great and not so great landing spots for these free agents. Maybe some of the players that we talked about tonight will be outlined on that episode as well. Before then, make sure you subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast so you never miss an episode of the IDP Show or the IDP After Show. Thanks once again, Kyle, for coming on tonight. It was a pleasure, as always, talking it up with you. Make sure you stay tuned to all of those fantasy football nuggets that you're dropping. I look forward to catching up with you next time on the IDP After Show.
This was the IDP After Show.